Good afternoon and welcome to this week's webinar, our latest edition of B2B Revenue Masters. This week, our topic is around turning up the ABM dial with and without AI. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Johnson from Hut3. Andy and the team at Hut3 are known for building ABM programs that actually move the needle for their customers. They're helping some of the world's most ambitious brands really generate pipeline, deepen engagement with their customers, and accelerate that deal velocity. So they're actually generating real revenue. They've worked on campaigns with UiPath, Immuta, Fujitsu, Atos, and their work has earned them lots and lots of industry awards, from the Global Agency Awards, the B2B Marketing Awards, and more. Hut3 has become a go-to partner for companies who are really ready to take ABM seriously. And Annie's going to walk us through today exactly how they do it in a way that I think is going to give our listeners real actionable insights, stuff that they can take away into their roles and actually use day to day. So, Andy, welcome.
Thank you. Well, what an introduction that was. I feel quite flattered, but I appreciate it. No, good to be here. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, so absolutely. No, I'm genuinely looking forward to the next sort of 30 minutes or so, just taking you through some of this stuff.
Perfect. Well, I know you've been speaking recently, actually, at some of the B2B. I think you spoke at Ignite, didn't you? And on ABM, yeah. And it's as hot a topic as ever. But why do you think it is such a dominant strategy today, even though it feels to me like it's been around for a long time?
Yeah, I think if I just move on a slide. This probably starts to help paint that picture a little bit. So, the B2B buyer has genuinely really changed, and it's changed quite rapidly over the last few years. If we look at now, we've got a B2B buyer, the number of brands in which B2B buyers will consider in that buyer's journey is up, and it consistently increases. You've often got, 70% of those buyers are through the journey before they even start to contact sales. You've got 80% have already made that particular sort of decision on who they feel they're going to work with. And I think those 3 points particularly really play to marketing, the need for us to sort of drive that engagement pre-sales and make sure that we've positioned the brand, the products, the services and the solutions in the right way. I think the challenge around that is that we've got ever increasing buying groups. This is well documented from Gartner through a number of different studies. Some say 7 to 14, some say 8 to 12, but fundamentally we sort of see between 7 and 13 sort of decision makers in that buying group. And actually probably one of the most alarming, not necessarily alarming, but one of the biggest statistics that we've seen is the incumbent loss rate has really increased. And I think that is a really good reason for selecting account-based marketing as a framework or a strategy going forward, not only from a net new perspective, because account-based marketing is very good at that, but also for making sure that you are absolutely defending your base with the customers that you're sort of looking at. I think also one of my favorite stats is this. So, at any one time, we may have hundreds, thousands of prospect accounts or indeed customers that we're trying to ultimately engage with. But actually, statistically, only 3 to 5% of your potential customers are actively looking to make a purchase at any moment in time. So marketing's job is to make sure that we're focused on the right accounts who we know want to potentially buy from us and can buy from us, but making sure that we're always showing up at the point when they do come to make that sort of purchasing decision. And I think that probably paints the picture a little bit around why organizations have shifted. So yes, there are some stats on screen here, that's well documented. You can find stats left, right and center about how companies are seeing improvement in closure rates, how they're seeing a much better reduction in waste of sales times because the leads that are generated are so much more effective. And then the predictions that, it's no longer really optional. It really is fundamentally part of B2B strategy. And I think the more we deliver account-based marketing programs, the more we see that. And I think the more we come into a world where MarTech allows us to see the accounts that we're engaging with, and actually see that from not only an intent perspective, but also see that from a level of real engagement in specific products and services that we can start to understand the buyers and where they are on the buyer's journey, then account-based marketing for me is absolutely should be front and center of sort of most B2B strategies.
Yeah. But then, if we know that we should be doing that, obviously, there are many businesses who are just getting to grips with real measurable marketing attribution and thinking, I really want to be doing ABM. Where should they start in terms of investing for their ABM efforts when they've got quite a tight budget?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question that, to be fair, we could thread throughout the majority of this presentation. But so we basically break down different types of ABM programs in this cake. So let me start the answer of that within this. So whether that's at the very bottom, your biggest slice of potential customer base, which is your total addressable market, or indeed where we start to really play, which is in that what we call account-based demand. So these feel like traditional demand-based programs, but they fundamentally sit within an account-based environment, because ultimately we are only targeting the prospect accounts and customer accounts where we want to grow. But ultimately we can target all of those in one go, particularly through some of the tools which we'll come on to a little while as we get into this. Then we move into those one to few. So people have different definitions of one to few. So some would say it's about verticalizing your programs, or indeed it's about going across all verticals into a line of business. So we don't specifically prescribe how that is. We just basically recognize that those types of programs are often probably some of the best for delivering fast ROI and proving that use case account-based marketing. Whereas at the top, which is where account-based marketing grew up, which is in those really highly personalized programs into single accounts, that's particularly expensive to see the return on investment. Often return on investment comes there in an 18-month cycle, because they are large accounts that you're trying to grow that share of wallet, and that takes some time to do. So I would say if you're starting anywhere today, I would look at a one to few program. I'd pick a vertical or a specific line of business. I'd pick a cluster of accounts, and then basically I would drive that particular campaign into that. You will find that that will generate a good number of identified accounts and actually qualified accounts where you can start to then align sales teams into much more effectively than probably some of the others in terms of being able to see that ROI quite rapidly. And one quick tip for people that is really worth doing is an 80-20 rule. So you'll probably find that 20% of your revenue is often coming from, 80% of your revenue is often coming from 20% of your actual customer base. So sometimes if you run that 80-20 rule, you can start to see how you can start to segment those into smaller clusters to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen a number of programs. I'm not going to go through too many case studies, but these are just a few that are well documented on our site. But this is a program that we did for Immuta. It's a one-to-one program. It's award-winning. It was relatively low budget, but as you can see, 800K's worth of pipeline for annual recurring revenue was actually a significant number for those guys. So, some really good percentages. And likewise, two case studies here, just stats. We ran a account-based demand program for Atos globally into multiple regions, into the healthcare sector, and actually we ran that over 12 months, and that achieved 255 million of pipeline growth, so quite significant. And on the right, where we're delivering one-to-one programs for UiPath, during the period in which we were running those programs, we saw an average of 137% increased annual recurring revenue from the accounts that sat on that program. And that was about 34 accounts that sat on that particular program. So I can tell you from our own stats itself that ABM genuinely does pay off when it's done correctly.
Yeah, and what was really interesting was the Atos example that you gave there, when you talked about going for a one-to-few approach, picking a particular sector. Even then, 12 months to recognize the revenue. So we have to be patient, but we have to really focus our efforts. It makes complete sense. Yeah.
And a really good point. So the 255 was pipeline, but actually during that 12-month period, the deal value closed was about 49 million. So you're quite right. It does take momentum, but I think if you've got the right program in place, what happened there was it just was left as an always on program. and became, sort of constantly feeding that opportunity.
Yeah. And we're all as senior marketers talking about AI, thinking about AI within our roles. How can B2B marketing teams dial up their ABM campaigns using AI?
Okay, really good question. Topic we absolutely love. I'll come on to the AI piece in a moment. Let me just position up. So if we talk about any of those particular programs, be that account-based demand, one-to-few, one-to-one, the four things that are really principal within account-based marketing is understanding their needs within that cluster or the single account, is showing up with the right content at the right time into the right job titles, is delighting with as much personalization as you can afford in terms of time to deliver that personalization and budget to deliver that personalization, and then being able to measure what they've liked. So we just basically pull those out in four key sort of simple points to sort of explain the sort of process that we would go through. And this is where our award-winning, promise I won't say it anymore, but our award-winning framework comes into play. So we go through a process of gathering the intelligence, defining the strategy, building the value proposition. Then we execute with the campaign development, and then we make sure we're measuring every single interaction to ensure that we understand attribution and ROI. So it breaks down into many more steps than that, but I've obviously not pasted it on here and for discussion today, but that's the framework in which we go through. So we basically launched our AI proposition about 2 years ago now. So we've been developing agentic AI workflows, and I'll come on to that in a second. But without agentic AI workflows, you can still utilize AI tools such as ChatGPT, to understand needs. We could do that to understand the types of content that we might want to produce. We could do that to sort of try and personalize some of that content. And then we could even do that to sort of interrogate certain data. But on its own, it's quite difficult to replicate in those sorts of scenarios. So we've built out 4 key agentic AI workflows. So any organization can do this, but we've just done it through learning the repetition of what we're trying to do within those types of programs. So we've got Enigma Insights, which allows us to gather insights on accounts and cluster of accounts really quickly. We've got our remix engine, which does exactly that. It remixes content into multiple programs. Personalization allows us to personalize that into accounts. And then Enigma Stories is about us turning that into sort of data stories. So just to position agentic, if you Google it, and you've probably heard lots about agentic at the moment, there's a lot of conversation about agentic. So it's where we take foundational models. So where billions of dollars is invested into AI solutions that are already out there, what we do is we hook up multiple different AI tools and solutions in order to create a workflow that can be repeated time after time. So it's really scalable. And then we build our applications on the top of those workflows. So much like an orchestra, if you imagine, ChatGPT might be the conductor, makes a little bit of noise, but nothing too amazing in our ears over a period of time. So as we start to bring in woodwind, brass, pianos, percussion, etc., then we start to make a symphony of noise. So that's pretty much what agentic is. It's about utilizing multiple AI tools to sort of solve your challenges. So this is a really good example of, so on the right hand side, you can see an output, which is an insight report. But to get to that insight report, we've actually programmed multiple AI tools to create the research plan, break down the questions, search the sources, analyze, and then basically summarize the findings. So we can change that every single time for every single account. So it's really effective and efficient for us to sort of generate reports, which used to take weeks and now takes days in order to do that. So that then serves up, account level reports, or it serves up, global C-level reports, or food and beverage, or chemical, depending on what subsection or one-to-few type programs that we're going into. And then I mentioned Remix. So I'll keep this really simple. Remix is a agentic workflow that allows us to take one piece of content, we put it into the remix engine, we can add optimizations and insights, and then it can remix that into a number of different types of materials really efficiently, of which then get a human review, obviously, because we still have human in the loop. But for example, what it means is that we could take this thought leadership content on the left-hand side, remix it really quickly into a life science, a food and beverage, and an automotive campaign, so that we can run those campaigns very effectively. Well, I keep mentioning, but really efficiently. Time to market is probably the bigger win here. Yes, it does much more for budget, and it does allow us to do more with less. But it's about the time in which those 3 individual campaigns and programs will take to go to market is so much faster. We're talking weeks rather than months. I'm nearly there, I promise. So personalization is an engine very similar to Remix. So we take content, we can load in multiple accounts that we want that content to be personalized to, and then it will literally personalize it. So this is an example of a one-to-few program. We're running into 8 different accounts on this scenario. But what we've done is we've taken one document and actually we've then personalized it into each of those target accounts. But when we think about personalization of content, we often think about a name change or a logo change. But this, as you can see, the copy on the left-hand side is completely different to the copy on the right-hand side. Same images, but what it's done is it's taken the insight of each individual account and what their challenges are and what they're trying to achieve, and it's turned all of that content based on exactly that. And then lastly is data stories. So the picture on the left is very familiar to most marketing teams. Fragmented data sets. You've got LinkedIn data, you've got Google Analytics data, you might have webinar, you could have certain tech stack feeding in, you could have Salesforce or any other CRM system, and actually trying to join up that and tell a holistic data story is really quite difficult. So we end up defaulting to impressions, clicks, etc., accounts that are in play. What we are doing here is we're leveraging their APIs to centralize that data. Then we can enrich it and we can really start to visualize that to tell data stories. So whether that's a data story that is at the very exec level who wants to know just the top stories, or leaders, or indeed account-based marketeers who want to know those clicks and impressions and how those campaigns are developing. So it really allows us to translate that into narrative that is actually much more digestible.
So going back to your point about like this sounds amazing. Obviously, I think we're all, it sounds like what you're able to do is use AI to get that to pull that research together to create your hero piece, but then further use AI to personalize those to say each of the accounts within that segment. How do you maintain the balance between the human touch that's required and obviously the efficiencies of AI?
Yeah, I think so. That's a really good question. I think it's worth answering that in a couple of different ways, to be fair. So firstly is the human part of account-based marketing is, if I go right the way back to the framework, one of the real human parts of that is how we connect up sales. So how we join up the dots, whether that's sales individuals, whether that's customer experience, and what part are they playing in that process. So yes, we can leverage content, we can engage and we can deliver that content much more efficiently than we could before using AI. We can do a lot of that within marketing, but how do we then also make sure that we're connecting up those sales teams in order to do that? So, and again, telling these data stories, my apologies, I should have flicked onto this particular slide, is something that we're doing there. So 2 things, I think one is the personalization of content and making sure that that's as relevant to those individual accounts as possible. And if possible, taking into account the individual job titles, etc. So trying to humanize that in that sense, but also, like I say, joining up all of those dots in an ABM program. And I think, just to reiterate, one of the things that defines a very good account-based marketing program is the alignment and the joining up of your sales, customer experience teams, etc., in order to make sure that those one-to-one personal contacts are as efficient and as personalized as others. So, we often build out what we call seller kits, for example. So that's arming those teams with the information to make sure that they're aligned to it, and also how we want them to start that particular play.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes some kind of sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And then you've got your Enigma solution. What other platforms should B2B marketers be investing in terms of tech to support their ABM? What should they be considered when they're evaluating platforms from their own side if they decide to plug into, an AI-based solution like Enigma to actually make it happen? What else do they need?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Let me try to explain this first. I'll come on to some of that particular part. But so for me, if we think about a typical account-based marketing program, then we want to basically make sure that we can measure the account engagement and understand exactly where the accounts are. Okay, so this for me is a very typical tactical plan. So if you look at the top in the pink, we've got the pink diamond. So they're our diamond accounts. They're our identified accounts that we want to run into. LinkedIn is a great tool because we can load just those accounts and we can just engage with just those accounts. And if we do it correctly, it doesn't need to be as expensive as some people think. So, yeah, we have cost per engagement across LinkedIn down to pence. But again, it's about the process and how you nurture and how you start to engage with those accounts. But let's park LinkedIn for a second. Then there's the programmatic opportunity. So again, with good, solid programmatic solutions like Astrad, for example, that we use a lot, then you can actually load your accounts into Astrad and you can start to identify the intent of those accounts, first and foremost, those that are in market. But also we can make sure that our programmatic ads only engage with those accounts through that type of platform. So that's one way. That, of course, then drives accounts onto some form of landing page, which is often the case. And for us, and I know I would say this, but genuinely, Lead Forensics has been a bit of a game changer, particularly since its integration with Cognizant as well. So first and foremost, Lead Forensics allows us to really easily see the accounts that are engaging. So we can start to see, have we engaged with the right accounts within LinkedIn and Astrad across programmatic? Yes. Does that translate to accounts on landing page? Yes. What content have they started? What pages have they gone onto on our website? So we can really start to build that picture. But at the bottom, what we can then do is integrate that with Cognizant data, which is, I think, probably the global best GDPR compliant data. Don't quote me on it, but it's very good GDPR compliant data. And what that does is saves sales teams particularly a lot of time because it instantly aligns data sets to the accounts that we know have engaged. So we don't just have to rely on LinkedIn and re-engineering that data to know the people that we're engaging with. We can now quite quickly see those accounts within a Lead Forensics environment and then start to sort of match that to Cognizant. Now, there are other tech stacks that would, and it would be amiss of me not to mention them. There are other tech stacks that do this holistically. And they're all very good, but they're not right for everybody. And I think for us, this is almost our default tech stack that we would always advise when people don't have a tech stack. And fundamentally, what this does is it's a vast percentage of what we need from that tech stack in order to deliver those account-based marketing programs, to measure them effectively and to sort of build out that sort of integration. So on this slide, and people can read this later, but it just sort of takes through. Yeah, we would use Astrad for that programmatic. We'd use LinkedIn to specifically target job titles, functions, etc. across social. Lead Forensics would be our way in which we would then measure that engagement on pages. If we were running one-to-one programs, and possibly in some case one-to-few, we might use some personalization software such as Follows and Turtle. Others are available, but they're two that we would probably start to look at. And then, of course, we've got that Cognizant data, which allows us to enrich, and then whatever your CRM platform is. Now, the good thing is about all of those is the majority of them will integrate through some form of API in some way, shape or form. So that's pretty much how we work. And I think these next two slides just really illustrate just the simplicity of the Lead Forensics interface. So the reason why we like this is because we don't get bogged down in the information that isn't relevant. We just get the account list in the middle that have engaged. We can understand the visit history on the right-hand side of what they've engaged with. Then in this scenario, we can see what programs they've engaged with, which is highlighted by the multiple colors through the middle. So if we're running multiple programs, we can really start to see very quickly what accounts have engaged with certain messaging, etc. And then, of course, on the right of this screen, we've then got that integration with the Cognizant data. So it pulls that data in specifically around that account. So it just makes the ability to show sales very quickly, the ROI from the program, because we can start to identify accounts and we can match data. And that's something before Lead Forensics, unless an organization had a very expensive tech stack in place, this was something that we just found we really arm wrestled with. And hence the reason why this has been a bit of a game changer for us in the way in which we sort of deliver that tech stack.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was just thinking back to the point you made at the beginning, which was, you know, yes, we've got these target accounts that we really want to either acquire or keep, as you also made reference to, but only 3 to 5% of those are in a buying mode
Correct.
or even thinking
Absolutely.
about it. So, and what you're using is here creating a model which allows you to see who they are and focus your
Yeah.
efforts in the right
Yeah.
area from the off. So you go wide, then you start to go deep.
Absolutely, and we're allowing that as well, particularly when all, often we'll go into a lot of organizations where they'll have a CRM system and they may have some kind of market automation platform that's aligned to that CRM system. And then they might be arm wrestling with what ABM software do we use. And there is specialist ABM software out there, like I mentioned, but generally we find this pound for pound is a very good way of delivering against those types of programs, to be able to see exactly as you said, see those accounts, see who's in market, see who's engaging, and then basically arm sales. And that's the key, because particularly within account-based marketing, as soon as we lose sales, then we do tend to lose the program. So it's about making sure that they see some of that progress really early on. And just very quickly, sorry, all I was going to say was that, the only challenge that gives us is that it does give us quite a few different fragmented data sets. So for example, Astrad, we'd look at that for the accounts that are engaging with the programmatic ads. Lead Forensics will tell us the accounts that are engaging on the landing page, and we can match that, as we mentioned. We might have some email marketing data that's coming into play, and we might have LinkedIn data. So for me, all I would say is that, and this can be done quite easily, it's just about understanding how we can bring those data sets into something like a Google Looker Studio or something like that, where we can actually interrogate all of that data in one place. So it really helps us build the overall pattern, not just one particular piece. So that's the only thing that overcomes the challenge that other software might do as a result of being, integrated, etc. And but for me, this as being tech agnostic as we are, because we have to work with multiple different types of tech, depending on our clients, what they have or what they don't have, and what we would then advise. This, for me, is, like I say, it's a very good way of bringing together all the requirements that we need in order to run a really solid account-based marketing program.
Okay, so that's your orchestration piece and how you're bringing it all together. And it's almost like you've created your own solution. But what you're saying is you need a dashboard, you need like a Looker or something like, or a BI, whatever it is, just to bring that data into place, and you can visualize that. So what does that look like in practice, in an example of a campaign that you've run? Can you share anything with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what I will share with you is a case study that I'm going to take you through in a second. But just to bear in mind, this case study is where we are aligning multiple programs. So you don't have to align all of these multiple programs, any one of these. But I just wanted to show the reason behind the strategy of what we're trying to do with this account, then the ability for us to utilize our AI tools to go at pace. And if that's what we want to do, actually what's really important is to align those programs. So we're running a series of programs for a company called TX1. So if we look across the middle, and I have no idea why I do the accounts as little suitcases, but they're little suitcases. So just humor me on it for a second. So imagine there are 1,000 accounts in this particular program. Okay. The first thing that's happening is we are running an always on programmatic into all of those accounts. Okay. So just imagine we say we're using Astrad and we're using all of those programmatics, and we can start to see the accounts that are engaging. Okay. That is allowing us to repurpose content that's coming from other PR campaigns or demand programs, but we can then align to this account-based program. Okay. Underneath that, we've then got a food and beverage cluster. We've got an automotive cluster. We've got a pharma cluster. So this is now when we're really targeting into those individual accounts. Then what we can see is we can see the account engagements. So if there are accounts that are our existing customers, we might move them onto a strategic one-to-one. If they're not, we want to accelerate them as a client, then we might move them onto a one-to-one accelerator program. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, one-to-one programs by their nature can seem quite expensive and heavy investment in time, effort, and energy. So for me, what's really important is only to expel the energy on those accounts that we know are already engaging with us. So this is a way in which we can actually utilize that to drive that sort of program. Others don't, by the way. Others will say these are our top 5 accounts and we want to run one-to-one programs. That's absolutely fine. We're just trying to engineer it in a way in which we can actually then engage with accounts that we know are engaging with us. So if I was to show you it in this scenario, what I'm trying to show you here is over on the left. If we use a piece of software like Lead Forensics, for example, we can see from that demand program the accounts that we're engaging with. And actually, do those accounts sit within a one-to-few bucket, or are they just in our account-based demand, or are they indeed in a one-to-one? Likewise, with the one-to-few program on the right-hand side, are they engaging? So we can really start to see the account and level of engagement as well. And then what that does for me is that if we've expelled the energy in order to engage broadly into those accounts, different job titles and functions in our demand and our one-to-few, then actually our one-to-few can become much more affordable, because it can be, we've done that landing of our brand and of our key messages into that accounts quite broadly. Now we want to go into key job titles, key individuals. So actually we can think more narrowly about the tactics in which we want to deliver one-to-one programs. So by aligning those programs, we actually reduce the media spend that we're doing, because we're not duplicating it into all of those individual programs. So what that means is that we can then run programs really efficiently. So here you'll see across the top, we've got a promise program, a legacy program, a thought leadership, a meeting of minds program, for example. So then we've got our always on program. Then we've got our vertical remixes of that, if you like. And then we've got our personalization underneath, where we're going to personalize those really heavily into a specific account. So what that looks like is you've got a account-based demand legacy report on the left, but then we can really remix that quite quickly into a transport, because we've got the insight and the knowledge gathered through Enigma Insights on transport. So we just remix that. Then we remix it into food and beverage. And then if we then do a one-to-one play where we've understood a single account and we've got that value proposition for that single account, then we can hyper personalize that content into that single account. So if I just quickly flick back up to this approach allows us to align those programs to be really efficient with our content and our repurposing of content and redevelopment of that content. But actually with a simple tech stack, we can then start to reduce budget of media spend, because we're actually seeing the accounts that are engaging and where they're engaging. So we don't multiply that effort in those accounts. So that sort of, I suppose, brings me to the last point, I suppose, if that's okay. I don't know if there are any questions on that before I come on to this last particular.
No.
So I suppose what I've tried to allude to over the course of the last few slides, and thanks for bearing with me, is that I think the only constant in B2B is change. But specifically at the moment, and you can research this, but there is huge amounts of change going on in the B2B buyer, environment and what's happening. There is a massive promise of ABM, but I think there are lots of organizations that are doing parts of ABM, but they're not necessarily doing it completely aligned with tech stack or indeed content and how they're delivering that. So in actual fact, it's not necessarily delivering on some of that promise, but once aligned, it does. Tech stack reality versus the dream for me is all about what you need your tech stack to really fundamentally do is to be able to target those accounts, to be able to measure that account engagement, and then to be able to align that as effectively and efficiently as possible in for sales. And then that data is key. So measuring that interactions and understanding where the opportunity sits is really the key part of that, and being able to then sort of create those solid data stories. So ultimately, all of that is fundamentally redefining the marketing and sales relationship. I think if you can do that, then genuinely sales become much more on board with the marketing play, because we're providing quality, not quantity, if that makes any sense. So there you go.
That's what we're doing. It does. And I think, you've done a brilliant job of summarising that there, Andy. So there isn't much else for me to say, but I will say the key things that I've taken away today there are numerous places where you can use AI as part of that initial campaign build, and it right through from obviously gathering your research and insight to then personalizing that so it's relevant for either a key vertical or for an individual business, and then you don't have to start your ABM with an all singing, all dancing tech stack. You can piece that together, but what you do need to use is something that will enable you to focus your efforts. So, you quickly gain some insight, and then you're focusing, and that's how, like, to your point, other point you made, get sales on board, because if they're like, yeah, great, these are the accounts that they're engaged in, these are the in-market accounts, then they'll be continue to be bought in. And the final one was on your end slide was like data is king. Now, normally in ABM, I think about data being king at the beginning of that campaign, and of course it is. But what you're saying here, which can sometimes be missed, is how important data is in terms of sharing that with all your stakeholders, your teams, the minute you start to get those interactions, because it isn't a case of you run your campaign, you get this insight, you push it out, and the revenue starts to flow in. It's like what we're paying for here, right now, is all the learnings that we're getting. And all of those learnings is going to become more revenue, but that's not going to happen overnight. And I think I loved I'm going to have to screenshot your data stories picture because your slide there, because I found that really useful. And I think that's how everyone continues to have the buy-in to what you're doing before that revenue gets recognized, because you're going on that learning journey. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Very much appreciated, and great to see how you're using lead forensics as well.
Yeah, no, generally it's been very good for us. So it really helps. I think the thing for me on it is specifically, sorry, I never stop. But the thing for me is that there is that ta-da moment or that aha moment, right? When often you run account-based marketing programs, and there is quite a period of time before you really start to see the intent build and those types of things. Whereas in actual fact, once they're hitting landing pages, if we could say these are categorically the accounts that we've engaged with, and we match that with LinkedIn data, for example, and we match that with Astrad, suddenly there's a real, oh, okay, yeah, these are the accounts we need to focus on, and you can start to see that data. But anyway, so yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and it's working. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Really great to talk to you today. I'm sure there's more we will do. So look forward to speaking again soon.
Speak soon. Good to see you.